Howdy folks, thank you for subscribing in and watching my Expedition Camper build series. On my last video, I took the big nasty and finally cut a big hole in this beautiful new Total Composites box that I built and installed my very first piece of glass, the Motorcraft Adventure Development's small skylight up in the front, which will be over my bathroom. And I went ahead and clamped that in and also weighted down the outside flange with a bunch of different weights of my containers of bolts and wires and things like that. And so that way I made sure all the glue and everything got really well sealed and cured to really hold and seal this guy in place before I then went back around the perimeter and further sealed up the flange from the outside. And so it turned out really nice. And now it's time to move forward and cut a lot of more big holes into this beautiful Total Composites Expedition Camper box and start installing windows and no other skylight. Here we go. So thank you for subscribing, and in this video I'm going to go over the window installation and I'll have a follow-on video with more tips. Again, that's just there for protection, but here's another from the saw blade. But another tip is always keep extras of everything. Not the prettiest tape, but it's cheap, and I just happen to have it handy. Let's take care of that. Let's measure down. Again, different color than what I had before, so I don't mix up my measurements. This was all necessary because I adjusted the height of this window from my previous drawings and measurements. Okay, so now before I proceed anymore, I'm going to do the old adage, measure twice and cut once. I'm actually going to measure like 14 times and hopefully get it perfect once. So I'm going to get back out my chart, even though I've got the numbers memorized. I'm just going to, even though I got it memorized, like I'm still working two different window sizes and everything else. So I want to make sure everything's perfect and I have not screwed up in any way. So I'm going to redo the math here, so hang on. Okay, those check out. What I'm doing is I'm taking the level and I'm putting on the top of the camper and I'm checking the level where the bubble is so I know what the top of the camper level is. And then I'm taking that where that bubble level is and basically replicating it down below everywhere. And I check it in a couple of spots just to make sure. And these tick marks I've made should be right on line with what the top of the camper is since I measure up top of the camper. And they are. Perfect. Okay. Now, what I need to do do the same on my verticals here to extend those. Same with the level adjustment and my existing lines. If you guys are hearing that noise in the background, it's probably the wind, because it is a windy day. Windy and stormy, which is why I'm trying to build a camper. It's going to be very warm and cozy for these kinds of conditions. Okay, again, I'm going to X out what I am not cutting. I'm even going to write interior cut, exterior cut. Take that down. This bottom is no longer going to be the new bottom. Sides will be the same. Okay, now hopefully these line up. Yay, it's all done. It's pretty ugly looking. I got my two different colors of tape. My cheaper tape here because I had it handy and it just will help protect the sidewalls from being scratched. I've got a lot of X marks out to mark where I'm changing my dimensions or where I got dimension wrong after double checking it. Circling my corners to make sure I know where I'm drilling my holes for the corners. Double checked on my measurements, my levels to make sure everything's level to the camper. And so it's amazing how sometimes like you draw stuff out and you think you got it all figured out, and you put one wrong dimension down, and then you got to go and do what I just did here and cross a bunch of stuff out. So it's just again the same old adage, measure many times and get it right. And so I've measured many times and hopefully I got it right. So now I'm going to go clean up the rear wall, which is where the last of the small windows is going, and the last of the 5 windows that I have not marked out yet. I went inside, I figured out my dimensions of where that's going to go on the rear wall, It's going to go higher up than these ones and get that light kind of reflecting off the ceiling, you know, more there to come back all the way through the whole camper and really create a long view from anywhere in the camper out that back window. I'm going to get that marked out, and then I'm going to start, after that, start drilling my corners and cut the first one and see how that goes. Before I get any kind of production, I'm just going to do the first one just to make sure I've got everything right as far as my dimensions and my process, my method of doing it, all that. Because I'm sure I might come into some stumbling block. Hopefully not. I think I've thought through it, and I think the plan's going to work well, but I want to test one out and see, you know, and then adjust if I need to after that first one. So here we go. So what I've done is I created my center line by measuring from side to side in a couple different places to make sure I've got a true center line. And then I've measured down, of course, from the top for my two different cuts, interior and exterior cuts. And of course measured out. I also double check those from side to side and top to top and checking level. They all seem good and right. And now I'm trying to decide which one do I start drilling first, drilling and cutting, because, okay, frightening moment of truth. This is it, going in. I'm going to make the first holes in my new camper box. I'm hoping I got everything right. As far as locations, places, my plan, all of it. Here we go. Wish me luck. Let's hope I get everything right. Let's hope I got everything right. Let's start over here. Hole one. Let's go check it out. And here's what it looks like from the inside of the camper on the opposite wall when drilling these holes through the windows, which do go through quite easily, particularly through the foam, but the inner and outer skins of fiberglass do take a little more effort to drill through. Okay, looks good. Let's hope it's right. Went through cleanly. Goes to the foam very easily. And I'm working really hard to make sure my drill is perpendicular to the walls because this is my alignment hole for the cuts from the inside and outside. Here we go. The first big cuts in the new camper. Frightening. Let's hope we get this right. Where to start? It's frightening. First big hole in the van. Big camper. Yeah, this is scary. It's sort of scary making this first big cut, but here we go. Got to do it. I had a lot of apprehension cutting these very first big holes into the new camper, in particular also with the new saw, and I realized it was pretty loud, so I had to add some hearing protection. Oh my God, that's noisy. I not only realized making this first cut that hearing protection was necessary, but also so was full face dust protection as well. It's a lot of debris and dust comes shooting off the saw and into my face. I did tape up this portable vacuum to the dust port collector on this saw, which helped a lot. Unfortunately, my friend here was able to hold that up for me while I was making these cuts. But those were a couple things I had to make improvements on, and also realized too that this melamine fine tooth cutting blade didn't work as well as a fiber cement board blade that I later on changed to, which worked a lot better. There's a lot of dust getting on my face. Now I have to drill these corners from the inside with a hole saw.
How do you know it's the exact spot?
That's what these pilot holes are for.
Oh,
I'm going to use those to clock the inside position. And then put those, and then do the same thing with the inside. Push this piece out, and then basically do the outsides. But before making the straight cuts between the corners, the rounded corners get hole sawed in. Man, all this for the first window. The second and third get easier. After moving to the inside, there was a little bit of extra trimming that had to be done to accommodate the Motorcraft Adventure Development's latch that they have on the bottom of the windows, which protrude just a little bit further down than the rest of the window cut. Well, and after making the interior cuts with the saw blade from the same corners, I went ahead now and made the recess for the window, as these Motorcraft Adventure Development windows are recessed into the exterior wall, part of the way into that wall, and that's how they get glued in and create their seal. And so I had to make two cuts, a partial depth cut from the outside after the initial plunge all the way through and the initial cut. And this is what it looks like, and this has turned out pretty well.
Ah.
Okay, that's good. That's,
Perfect.
Oh yeah! Look at that!
You did it.
Oh my! I think she's gonna work. Bravo! Bravo! Okay, lights coming your way. Oh, yay! Yay!
Perfect.
Yay! Thumbs up! Yay! And after this success, it's time to move on to the next window, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. Here we go. I learned some things after drilling and cutting that opening for the first window that I'm now changing up my process by actually drilling out with the hole saw the corners first, and I found that works a little better for integrating with the saw cuts that'll happen later. How to get the plug out. And now that I've got some production going, I'm going around to all 5 of the windows and drilling the hole saws into the corners to give them a nice big round radius corner. But these hole cuts only can go in about 1.5 inches because that's the recess of these mad windows. All right, back with a clean bit. That one was really stuck. This is dirty work. Okay, let's make sure this one gets as deep as it needs to be. Okay. Oh. Okay. Oh, that was exhausting. Now I have all my holes cut. I'm going to go up the roof and cut those. And then I start circular sawing between the lines. Cut out the windows now. Fellow campers, camper builders, window installers, you name it. Here we are back to installation day number 3 or 4. I've added more tape on the window all the way around to make sure that saw is not going across and scratching anywhere. I don't want that to happen. I've also re-measured the windows because the dimensions that Motorcraft Adventure Developments have provided are a little bit narrow when you take into account the screws that come through to hold the hardware on for the window latch hinge mechanism. That protrudes out a little bit further, adds about another 1/2 inch to the width. And then on the height of the windows, there's also a little bit extra dimension that gets added, almost 1/2 inch, because of the latch at the bottom. And it's only in a couple of spots where those latches are, but nonetheless it does add more. Last time I kind of scraped it out for the other large window and scraped it out and so forth, and the foam, and it just seemed like more work than it's necessary, especially because these will be turned out on the inside regardless. And so I'm going to just make the cuts just a little bit bigger, and hopefully that means 1 cut for each rectangle, which is really 3 rectangles to cut. The 2 outsides, which are going in about 1.5 inches deep, and then the 2 on the exterior here that are the inners that will go all the way through. But I won't cut them all the way through with my saw, but then I'll go through there on the interior and cut them all the way through. And that's partly because it just seems to be an easy way to go. The saw does not cut all the way through very easily on these. So that's the method. So here we go. It's going to be fun and dusty. Managing the dust is really key, and having a helper to do that or a dust collector connected to your saw is really important, but also really managing the placement of the blade so it doesn't run on you. So a little bit about what's going on here is the Motorcraft Adventure Development windows do have a recess, and not only do they have a recess within the window opening, so you have to essentially cut 2 openings, but also there's a little bit of a protrusion where the latches are down at the bottom there, so you have to almost create a little secondary recess within there. Sometimes this does also involve a little bit of a secondary tertiary cut, which I'm doing here. And as you can see, I also am very fortunate to have a great helper who has been helping me install some of these windows, along with a couple other friends as well. and that's been fantastic to have that help. It really takes 2 or 3 people to install these windows, at least at one point, one to hold the window in while the other person's checking things out on the inside or outside, but also a second person, at least a second person, to do cleanup, and that means holding a vacuum to the cuts and so forth, or managing, in this case, a dust collector, or helping to do cleanup and things like that, or be a second set of eyes, one on the inside, one on the outside, to really see how the window is fitting and test fitting into these recesses that you've now created and cut into the walls, and then how that all goes in. So it all goes in pretty quickly and pretty easily, but there's certainly some tips and tricks that I'm going to share a little more on the next video to help you out if you are going to go install these kinds of windows, or these windows specifically, or something similar to them. So with that, hopefully this really helps, and it's really exciting to have these windows in. I'm going to share more with you about the finished product here coming up on a future video. Another thing, just kind of keep in mind while you are installing these windows, or at least if you're just interested in the installation that I've done here, there's a lot of up and down on the ladders. You do need at least a couple ladders for each of the people working, and it definitely is dangerous going down the ladders, particularly carrying tools and wearing all the protective gear and so forth that's there. And of course, in this case, also a battery operated dust collector, which was essential to helping to keep the garage space clean and also manage that dust and so forth that builds up. Otherwise, it just gets everywhere. And of course, that also means that it can be a respiratory hazard. So carrying that shop vac or dust collector up and down the ladder was definitely effort, along with the tool and managing all the cords and hoses and so forth that you have with that. But man, it's fantastic. And think about all that dust that gets collected in there. So it was great to have. Gluing it up actually is probably the easiest and funnest part. After cleaning up the window frames and the walls themselves that the window is going to get adhered to, it really is a matter of applying the Sitka 252, in this case, one of the recommended adhesives from Motorcraft Adventure Development, and very carefully holding it and pushing it up into the recess. And after it gets up in there, just make sure it's pushed in, clamping it in, which takes some blocking to clamp it in, and then checking level to make sure that it's as level as it can be relative to the level of the camper itself while it's all being going in. And of course, cleaning up any mess around there. And then I did not go and do any trim of that seal, and I go ahead and let the little bit of push out from the window frame and also to the wall, because I come back later and clean it up a couple of days later after the clamps have had a time to hold it in place, make sure there's no movement, and the adhesive sealant has cured up to really pretty much near full strength within those 2 or 3 days before I come back in and then reapply a sealing seal all the way around the edge of the frame, which makes it look so nice and clean. So I'll update a little more on that coming up here on a future video. So thanks so much for watching. There's a lot more to come on this Expedition Camper build. Got windows. Big window, small window. Got 2 windows in, 2 windows in. They were a lot of work. It was really, really hard. A lot of work. So I actually got more than 2 windows in. Created a lot of dust. Got these other 2 windows in here too. And so there's 2 more. 2 bigs, 2 small, and 1 more small one. It was a heck of a lot of mess. And let me tell you, I don't really feel like I know what I'm doing. It's all figuring this out as I go. It's no doubt about it. It's a learning lesson. But I'm sharing this with you to hopefully help you and motivate you with any kind of installation you're doing, like these windows or anything else. You can see you got these windows cut, installed, clamped in, and they look great. I am so thrilled to have these Motorcraft Adventure Development glass windows, dual pane, Expedition Camper windows. I'm going to share a couple more videos with you on the windows, the skylights, and also a bunch more things coming up. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and see you next time.